Welcome, everybody. Welcome to the Ishtar channel podcast. We've got a wonderful topic to discuss and talk about with you today. One that, again, I think is a little controversial at times. It can be thought-provoking. It can be challenging. But I think that within that, we have a beautiful opportunity to help our listeners really explore their idea of what the word karma actually means. So this is our topic for our discussion today. And I would like to begin by, I always hear, oh, good things happen to bad people and bad things happen to good people. I hear sayings such as, karma's going to get you, it'll all come back around sooner or later and, bite you on the bum and, you'll learn your lesson that way. You can't get away with anything. All of these remarks, all of these sayings. And I feel we were just chatting before we came on and I feel that a lot of these come from the stories that we create for ourselves around what we think is fair, and we're trying to find fairness, some kind of justice for what happens and why it happens in the world. And when we try and explore some meaning and purpose to what happens and why it happens, we start to create an idea and a story around what we think karma is so that it fits into that ideal of what fairness is and what justice is when we're seeking for it. So, Ishtar, I'd love you to begin by explaining to us what you've come to understand about karma from the masters and the wisdom that the masters have shared with you over the years, and how that's deepened your understanding of what karma is and how we create it, how we resolve it. But first of all, what is it from the standpoint of consciousness and energy?
Yeah, thank you, Jo. And it's a big topic. And I think in our Western world, we've really abused the word karma and misused it constantly, not understanding really what we're talking about. And we do this from that sense of what's right and what's wrong, based on what we think is right and wrong from our opinions, and from that sense of seeking fairness or justice. So we do it from a sense of judgment as well. But really, the masters and the work that I've done with them for the last 23 years has been all about karma, because they focus very much on the karma that we hold and we have created, because it's what's causing our world to be as it is today. And so they have taught me a lot about karma and how to work with it and how to resolve it, and what it is. So really just get an understanding that the actual meaning of the word karma for us is actually, it is action. That's what it means. Karma is action. So it's action. It's something that we have done, an action we have done, or we have created and manifested. And so that's really what karma is. We need to remember this, and the energy that comes out of that action creates consciousness that we hold. So it's a response to an action that we have manifested ourselves, or a response to an action that somebody else has manifested. So it's the consciousness that's created from that action is really what the karma is all about. And whether we hold karma or whether we don't. Now, we need to also understand that karma is not good and bad karma. It's simply, karma is the action of what it's manifested. What has it manifested for you? What is the consciousness that's manifested from the action? So we often speak about unresolved consciousness or unresolved energy and resolved energy. That means energy that's unresolved, energy that's not in balance, and energy that is in balance. So when you've got actions, your responses to that can be an energy that's in balance or an energy that's not in balance. Now, it's the energy that's in balance that we often call dharma. We have had an action, we have created and manifested some sort of action. We have responded to it with balanced, harmonious consciousness. Or we have responded to somebody else's action with harmonious and balanced consciousness. Or we have responded to our own action or someone else's action with unbalanced, non-harmonious consciousness. You might say negative and positive. I hate to use the polarities so much, but we can respond with a positive response or a negative response to an action that's happened. And it's the response that creates the karma, because it's what you end up holding, is the consciousness of your response.
So we're talking about cause and effect, the cause being the experience,
the action. Yeah, that's right.
And then the effect being what we create from that action.
That's exactly right. Yes. Yeah.
So we can tie into this discussion around karma, we can tie in the power we have to make a choice, which is us taking an action in life, choosing something and acting on that choice. And then understanding that as we act on that choice, which is our power, when we act on our power, which is to make a choice, we take an action, and that has an effect in some way. It creates something, it creates some sort of energy.
That's right.
So if we gave an example to our listeners, let's say your partner cheated on you.
Yes. Okay. Good one.
Well, it happens. And so, you know, right, we can give lots of, you know, realistic experiences that we have here as a human being on the earthly plane, experiencing the polarities. But let's say we're in a relationship and our partner cheats on us, has an affair, and that is the action of them that is causing us to respond or react. And depending on what energy we react with is going to depend on what we then create as balanced karma or unbalanced karma.
Yeah.
Would that be right?
And it would be right. And the interesting thing with that is, of course, is that all your friends, if somebody cheats on you, your friends often say, oh, the karma will get him or her, the karma will get them. And so there's the assumption that whatever energy is being created by them is going to be imbalanced or negative, and so that's going to come back to them and hurt them in some way. So we're saying they're going to get hurt from this action. But the thing is, you've got two people involved in this. You've got a partner, the two partners, they're both responding to an action that one of them has created, and the partner that has been cheated on is then going to go into action or reaction and create something else again. So that could, you know, that's going to be karma. Now, if the partner who has been cheated on says, oh, right, well, thank you for telling me. I understand. You've told me why, and I understand. And I'm not going to go into this major, you know, they choose not to go into anger and reaction and hit the partner or throw the partner out or whatever. Or, you know, that whole I'm being abandoned, I've been betrayed, I'm not worthy of their love because they've been with somebody else, you know, all the stories that can come up out of that. And we could pick any story, and if it's not an aligned or balanced story, if it's a very negative story, then that's karma that the partner's creating for themselves from what they've learned about the action of their partner. Now, we can go to the partner who did the cheating. Now, they could create karma for themselves, for example, if they feel really guilty about it, which they may do, hence they've told the partner they're out of guilt. So they're judging themselves and they're feeling really guilty. Well, if they're going to hold that story of guilt, then that's going to create karma for them, because it's not a very balanced energy, is it? it's going to cause them pain and them some suffering from that guilt. If they believe that what they did was normal behavior and everybody has, sexual needs, for example, and they're exploring those sexual needs, but it doesn't affect the love they have for their partner, well, then there may not be any guilt. They may feel guilty that they've hurt their partner, and that could create karma for them, but they may feel nothing. They may feel that this was an appropriate thing to do, and they're not creating any karma. So the fact that you're saying, oh, they're going to get karma, no, because there's no consciousness that's been created that's out of alignment to them, to their energy. Yeah, they're not carrying, they're not going to carry it on. Whereas the person who goes into reaction to that action of cheating, if they've gone into reaction and they're angry and they're upset and they go into whatever story, for example, I'm obviously not good enough for him or her to cheat on me, so therefore I'm not good enough, they don't love me enough because I need to be better than I am. And then they create this whole story around, which is consciousness, and they sit in that story. Then what they've done is just created karma for themselves. They've created unresolved consciousness from the action. So what we're talking about is, what are you creating from the action?
So how does, and this can be a really challenging, it's challenging for me to ask these questions because I'm feeling a part of me that's going into judgment. I'm feeling a part of me that's clearly got a strong opinion about something here.
Right. Yeah.
And I'm just, and observing that part of me. And a question that comes up for me is, so what about rapists or pedophiles or, people that are doing really heinous actions, making heinous choices out there in the world? And we're saying that there's, in such situations, there may be no karmic debt to pay, which of course is another, belief that we have
story.
about.
Yeah. And this is the struggle, isn't it? That we come to, is that there has to be some payment. There has to be, if you're going to do those sort of things, then you have to pay for it. There has to be, the blame and the justice and the payment. And this comes from thousands of years of religion that says, there is a very judgmental God that's going to judge everybody. And therefore we come into that belief that, there has to be some judgment for what we perceive to be bad, evil actions. And certainly we're not condoning those actions. But the thing is that what I've learned through my work with the masters is there isn't a judgmental God. There is a source energy, a core creator source energy that runs through each and every one of us. And it is there, but it doesn't judge. It has no attachment to what you're choosing or not choosing to create and manifest in your physical world, and that comes back to us. So when there's, as you say, a rapist or a pedophile or whatever else, that comes back to our physical judgment, our physical world, where we will then judge that person and punish them accordingly to the rules of our society. And we like to impose those rules of our society upon what we call God or spirit, not realizing that God or spirit really does not hold that division, does not hold that need to punish and to judge.
So from a growth and evolution perspective of the soul extension that comes, how is that soul extension learning and growing through its actions if it holds no remorse for such an action?
Well, if it's holding no remorse for such an action, the very statement of that is saying that we have to learn from some pain, some blame, some suffering in some way. It's the only way we can learn. And that's not really true, because spirit actually doesn't want us to suffer, and it doesn't want us to get into negativity and blame and judge. It wants us to come into unification and oneness and co-creation with spirit. Of course, if someone's not choosing to do that, that is part of their learning. But what they're learning from is learning from what they're creating in their own energy field. Because someone who's creating those sort of crimes, rapists, pedophilia, whatever it might be, and a pedophile, as we know, will tell you that they love the child that they're abusing, that comes from love. And we shake our heads when we hear that. But a pedophile will tell you that it comes from love. So they're believing that it comes from love. So, but what they're creating in their own field is they're actually disconnected from spirit. So therefore, they're living through a disconnection to spirit, a disconnection to source. So they're living in their experience, in their consciousness, from a deep disconnection. So their whole consciousness will have very little harmony, very little peace, whatever they're feeling about their actions. Some of them, it's going to be very individual. Some may be very guilty, but can't help themselves. Some not guilty, they feel it's love. Whatever the reasoning is, we can go into that and spend ages talking about that. But that's very individual. But the thing is that they're not living through a connection to spirit, which of course can be said for a great percentage of humanity, in living in complete disconnection to their soul and their spirit. But that creates an experience of life that has a lot of lack within it. So let's not say they're not, they may not being punished or judged in the way our ego would tell ourselves that's how it should happen, unless of course they're caught by society and they're incarcerated, which is the rules of our society. And so that's what imposes the rules of the physical world. If you create those sort of crimes against humanity, then this is what happens. And that's the rules of our society. But we're talking about the rules of spirit. We're talking about the universal laws. We're talking about the rules, the whole consciousness of spirit. So when you live with a complete lack of spirit in your life, because if you're filled with spirit, you're not going to perpetrate those sort of crimes. Well, you aren't going to perpetrate crime against someone else. You're not going to harm or hurt another living being if you are filled with spirit. So their experience on earth is going to be one of complete lack of connection to spirit.
And they'd have discernment over their idea of what is done out of love.
Yes.
Which is a distortion of that
of course it is.
Understanding. Versus the true act, if you like, of behaving out of unconditional love, which would lead to very different actions, very different behaviors.
And why have they got this disconnection to spirit? They've got a disconnection to spirit because of their reactions and responses to actions that that they've either created or experienced in this life or any other. A child is abused by somebody, often can become the abuser because it's what they know. And that abuse becomes normal behavior for them. So they don't see it as abnormal behavior.
Yes.
And perhaps, the rapist has been raped themselves in this life or any other, or perhaps they've been, a warrior at war and it was normal behavior to rape and pillage, then that's become an accepted norm for them in their consciousness. But it would also disconnect them to spirit. So once again, cause and effect. So we have to understand there is cause and effect with all actions. Either your response to someone else's actions or your response to your own actions. And you carry that with you all the time.
We often, with what you're sharing, we often talk about contracts, soul contracts, and how souls come to the earth to experience particular lessons, or it's a soul's contract to experience a disease, or a soul contract to experience a particular energy that may require us to experience something at a physical level, whether it's a disease, whether it's a handicap, whether it's a disability, whatever it might be. How do soul contracts, is that something that the masters speak about, or is that again a confusion of our understanding of what a soul has come to learn through?
My understanding from the masters is that, number one, a soul is never going to create a contract of suffering. The masters will tell you there is no need to suffer. We create our suffering for ourselves. So, soul contract to suffer, my understanding is there is no soul contract to suffer, that you must suffer. And so
when we're creating it, you're referring to the ego aspect of ourself.
Yes.
We're creating that through our programming, through the lower consciousness, if you like, the mind's consciousness of its experience, rather than the soul's consciousness of its experience.
Yes, but when things happen, I mean, we tend to want to put reason and explain what is often unexplainable. So we don't want, our mind and our ego hate, chaos. We want to put everything in a box and explain it away. So we say, oh, that's a soul contract. That's been created from a soul contract. We have this disease from a soul contract. Well, the thing is that, disease, or, a child dying. I think we just had this talk recently with somebody about, children dying in infancy and things like that. It happens because of the chaos we live in. It happens because of disease or illness. It doesn't happen because there's a soul contract. I'm going to come in, I'm going to die. It happens for numerous reasons that are very physically explained. And we want to put it onto the soul. But I'm going to say to you, your soul is never going to ask you to suffer. Spirit's not going to ask you to suffer. It's the suffering that we are attached to, once again, comes back to old religious beliefs. And all of us, I mean, any light worker that's listening to this, guaranteed you have been in temples or, convents or monasteries. You have been some sort of religious person at some stage, and you have been indoctrinated with religious beliefs. And Catholicism has been very, very strong in the point of suffering, and entrenched in that. A lot of consciousness is entrenched in that. So I think we come back to that whole belief that, to grow, you've got to suffer. And it's, no pain, no gain. You have to have pain to gain. But the question I've got to ask is, why do we feel we have to have pain to gain? Spirit doesn't feel that. The masters have told me time and time again, this planet was created for souls to come and experience the beauty and the wonder of creation. Everything on this planet is magnificent. All the animals, the ecosystems that are on this planet, all created to support us to live and to enjoy the miracle of creation that is all around us.
Mm. Mm.
Now, spirit hasn't come along and created the destruction on this planet. Spirit doesn't create war.
Mm.
The ego creates war. You know, we're still the only species on this planet that is happily and busily killing itself off right now.
Mm.
Spirit hasn't asked us to do that.
Mm.
Spirit doesn't come and
So,
say sabotage everything.
so when we sit with our ascension council as a soul before we incarnate,
Yes.
what does the consciousness, what is occurring with our ascension council before we incarnate? In term, is there an exchange of energy, of understanding, of wisdom that a soul extension does want to come and experience? Is what occurs in that process? I've often heard you speak of us sitting with our ascension council.
Yeah. Well, essentially, firstly, the consciousness of unresolved energy, or karma as we call it, but it's unresolved energy that we're holding that's not aligned to divine truth, that will be the focus of the council. Because until we actually resolve that back to truth, we can't grow. So that will be one of the focuses. The second focus will be to look at the gifts that we hold in our higher consciousness, in our higher wisdom, and ask, are we willing to manifest those gifts in this incarnation? And what is it we need to experience or master to move through that old consciousness that we're holding in our being? Because once again, reminding everybody that we are this huge balloon of pure light consciousness that is connected to source. And over the many eons of coming into physicality, we have created through that ego mind, through our choices, consciousness that is forgotten the pure energy, its original blueprint. It's no longer aligned to that original blueprint, and in many cases no longer aligned to the soul mission or the soul or the spirit itself. So the Ascension Council is going to look at your overall consciousness. It's going to look at that beautiful ball of light that you are and the consciousness that's sitting within it that you've created. And it's going to ask you to come back into physicality and to do something about that.
Mm-hmm.
Now, it's not going to tell you how to do it. It's not going to go and say, well, go and suffer to do it. It's going to say, this needs to come back to light. This needs to come back to truth. This needs to be resolved. And so when you come back in,
experience of it on some level.
Sorry, I didn't hear that. What was that?
Which means that we have to have an experience of that energy on some level.
No, we have created that energy. We have created that energy from our response to an action or an experience. Yes.
Yes. And so if our Ascension Council is asking us to look at that energy, work with that energy, bring that energy back into alignment, then on some level of our being, we have to become conscious of that energy to actually be able to work with it.
Well, yes, we do, but that energy is in our field. It's going to affect us. So, for example, you know, you've created an action. Maybe you were a rapist you raped 100 women in a war in the south of France in the Middle Ages. And you started to feel guilty about that, and you created self-loathing for yourself. And so you created this consciousness of self-loathing. Now, over time, that's certainly going to affect you. Yeah. So what are you going to do with that self-loathing? You can go out into the next life and you can continue to rape confirming what an awful person you are and confirming that self-loathing. So you could continue to repeat the action that created that self-loathing in the first place. And we could say, oh, well, you know, that's heinous crime, but also creating suffering for yourself. You could, there are so many potentials of what you could or couldn't do with that consciousness. You could go out there with your self-loathing and hate everybody else as much as you hate yourself and perpetrate that, which is only going to make that energy, that consciousness grow. You could go out with your self-loathing and, you know, not have refuse and resist all relationships because you're never good enough. You've got this terrible self-loathing. I mean, there's so many myriad potentials. You could go out there and you could give service and you could become a Mother Teresa with your self-loathing, trying to appease this judgmental God so that you can, you know, that God could take this from you. Yeah. Or you could choose to sit and reconnect with spirit so that you could learn oneness and unconditional love for self, which spirit would bring to you. Because spirit is not going to give you more self-loathing. Spirit is not going to make you suffer for your self-loathing. Spirit is not going to ask you to go and repay the debt. Spirit's going to call you and say, bring this consciousness to me and I will hold you in unconditional love until you are ready to meet that within yourself. So you have many potentials about how you choose to respond to that consciousness you've created within yourself that you've been carrying lifetime after lifetime because of the actions that you created many lifetimes ago. And you can choose what you want to do with that, because that is the will you have. You've been given free will. You've been given the power to make a choice about what you're going to do.
And I'm really glad that you've explained it like that, because it's so important, I feel, for people to understand that whatever energy that they are holding on to, there are, as you say, unlimited potentials as to how that energy is experienced, what you choose to recreate with it. Because often there's this idea that, you know, whatever, you know, as we said, whether it's, you know, rape or burglary or, you know, whatever that is, we assume that we're going to meet that exact same action again in the future. But it's, you know, it's not. It's a case of the energy itself has unlimited potential to create, you know, unlimited experiences of that energy. And that becomes our free will, that becomes our power to choose. And then understanding, as you just said, which was so beautiful, that to really understand spirit is to understand that there is this eternal essence, this eternal part of yourself, your light, that is always holding a space, always holding its light open to you.
That's right.
To come and bring that energy back into oneness, back into balance.
That's it. And that's the whole reason we're here, to learn how to do that. That's the mastery that we're being asked to come into. And we have a choice, you know. And so we can look at humanity and look at, you know, how we're constantly moving around this karmic wheel. What is the karmic wheel? It's the repetition and the expansion of consciousness that is not aligned, that is not imbalanced, and that is not harmonious, and that doesn't hold unconditional love. And it's moving further and further away from spirit, not moving to spirit.
Mm.
Why is it doing that? Because the ego is in control. You know, the shadow energy that we've created through that karma is in control, and it doesn't want to let go of control. So we will create all these stories of negativity and punishment and suffering and all of these things, no pain, no gain, all of that stuff, to coerce us into continuing that old behavior.
Yeah.
You know, so the karma is not released. I mean, you know, we've been creating wars on this planet basically since we've been here. We're still creating the old galactic wars here. We haven't let go of the karma of the galactic wars, which happened billions of years ago. We're still doing that because we haven't moved to spirit. We keep moving away from spirit.
Mm. Mm.
And that's part of our mastery. And, you know, people talk about ascension and they think ascension's just getting off the planet and going somewhere else. But that's not ascension. Ascension is the unification of all of your consciousness back to the pureness of spirit. Now, as we move further away from spirit, that unification is not happening. We need to bring ourselves back to spirit, you know? And
I'd
that's
like us,
not bringing ourselves back to a judgmental God that wants to create pain and suffering. That's still moving away.
I'd love us in another conversation to actually speak about ascension, because again, it's the from my learnings with you and the masters, it's again another really misunderstood concept of consciousness and how consciousness moves in the universe, and how the universe is expanding through that ascension process, and that we often relate to it very much as the physical experience of being either in a body or not in a body.
That's right.
And so I'd love us to explore that on another occasion. But I just, you know, I really hope that, because as I said, it is a challenging conversation. It's a challenging subject, but I really hope that our listeners, and I want you to consider what you might want to leave our listeners with as a thought, because I have no doubt that what we've shared is going to challenge those that do sit more in the mindset and the energy of needing to feel that there's some kind of get even or some kind of outcome for someone's actions. And of course, often they want the outcome to be something that fits into what they believe is justifiable.
Well, they want spiritual justice.
Yeah.
And you know, as soon as we talk about that, we're talking about the word judge. We're talking about judgmental consciousness, separation, and anger and blame and all of these things. And we also come back to victimhood, and we're powerless and this has been done to us, you know, but we forget about the laws of resonance and the laws of reflection and all the universal laws that are there, the law of love, the law of compassion. We need to also remember that someone's action is based on the consciousness that they're holding within them at the time of their action. Now, if they're holding a lot of unresolved consciousness within them, a lot of shadow energy, then that will be guiding their action, what they create. The less shadow energy, the less unresolved, imbalanced energy you hold, the more conscious you will become about what you're creating. And that's what we're being asked to be conscious about what we're creating. So to say, oh, you know, karma's going to get them, they'll get theirs. Well, it's, you know, I understand the anger and the revenge and the need for justice. But the fact is, as soon as you speak that, sense the energy of your words. Because as soon as you speak that, you're projecting anger and judgment and blame without knowing anything about the person at times, or even when you do know, you don't know what their past lives have been. And we need to remember that we are each a spirit holding consciousness, and that consciousness is being created over many incarnations on this planet and in others, and we carry that with us all the time. We don't leave it behind. We are one spirit moving in and out of physicality, whether it be the human body, the animal body, a tree body, whatever it is, a whale body. We are moving in and out of physical body all the time. And whatever we're holding in the consciousness of our spirit moves with us. So instead of creating more judgment, more negativity, then simply hold any perpetrator in your heart and ask simply for spirit to hold them. You know, just ask the spirit to hold them. Because there is no need for suffering. We can learn without suffering. We can learn of abundance without suffering. People say you have to have lack to learn abundance. Well, you can have lack and you can stay in lack forever. But when you are given abundance, and look around us, there is so much abundance all around us that's been given to us, and yet we take it for granted. So it really is opening our hearts to spirit. And if you open your heart to spirit, then spirit would never say, oh, they'll get theirs. Because that's not the way of spirit. Because spirit understands karma.
Yeah. It's, you know, I just wanted to share it comes to me now, and I realize the importance of the experience I had very early on in one of the sacred mystery schools. I actually had a dream which totally shifted. It shifted vibrationally my consciousness, because how I started to think from that moment onwards towards perpetrators. I was in this dream and I saw myself as being a victim to being raped.
Yeah.
And then in this dream, I opened a door and then saw myself being the perpetrator, the one who was actually raping, being violent. And then I opened another door and I was the person who was standing just watching, letting it all happen. And I observed myself in these three states: being on the receiving end, being the person who was doing, and then being the person who was just standing and not doing anything. And I remember this is years ago, but I remember waking up from that dream and having a complete shift in how I judged anybody who had done, because in that moment I realized I'd done it all. I'd been on the receiving end. I had also done it. And I was just like meeting that part of myself, as much as it was confronting. I couldn't deny a part of me that was then saying to me, so can you really sit in the same judgment now you know?
Yeah.
And it was, you know, such a pivotal shift in my consciousness and how I view the world. And I, you know, kept it to myself for a long time, because I was trying to integrate what a shift it was for me not to have the same reaction and not to have the same, you know, volatile response to certain things I'd either see or be told. And I started to view, you know, people who are experiencing in this lifetime what I had seen myself do in other lifetimes. And I'm just, wow, it's just the soul meeting that energy, meeting that energy that they're needing to experience so they can decide what they're going to do with it next.
Yes. Yeah. So,
and
that's so true, isn't it? Yeah. I mean, that's, you know, that's such a beautiful wisdom to come to.
And it was incredibly healing for me.
Yeah.
As you know, as much as the dream at the time was confronting, I came out of that dream, woke up with, as you say, a wisdom that shifted my energy.
Yes. Yeah. Because spirit came to you to show you that.
Such a gift in healing in that moment. So I want to just, yes, it was an awakening.
Yeah, it was an awakening.
I really want to just thank our viewers that are still with us listening, because I know it's been a challenging conversation, a confronting conversation. It will trigger many people, but for those that are willing to open their minds and their hearts to find, if you're wishing to find peace within yourself, then I really do believe that opening your mind and your heart to what Ishtar has shared with us and what the masters have shared with Ishtar over the years, it can support you to really open a part of your consciousness that's going to bring you into more peace than the turmoil that we often find ourselves in when we're looking for that justice in some way. So I really want to thank you for exploring this conversation with us. It's not an easy one, but there's much wisdom to be had if we're open to a greater understanding.
Yeah. And really working with those parts of yourself that are angry or in judgment or whatever, and let them come to spirit. That's so important, because the more you do that, the more you come into compassion for self, and the more you have compassion for others, and you let go of this need to find justice and blame. Yeah.
Thank you, Ishtar. I think there will be another opportunity to speak to how we can help people meet those parts of themselves. Definitely. And work with that.
And it's a journey. It's a journey. Be kind to yourself with it, you know, be kind.
It really is.
Yeah, it is.
Thank you.
Thank you. Blessing.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.